Okay. Sure. You're famous. You're on
You're
the
a
website.
celebrity.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well, as we have been doing, we look at a psalm that was classified as a psalm of mercy, and then we look at one of the scripture readings, which just happens to be probably the most famous of scripture passages that deal with God's mercy. So, first of all, in the other sheet that I gave you again is a copy of the commentary by Father Patrick Henry Reardon on the Psalm. So I just thought it would help for your own reading and learning. And remember that at the top of the page where it lists the Psalm, it will say Psalm 56, but it will have in parentheses 57. That's because Father Reardon is Orthodox, and they follow the Septuagint numbering of the Psalms, which is off by one after Psalm 8 and before Psalm 148. So, okay?
Can I just ask a question
Yes.
on this? On page Roman numeral 3, or that's, I guess 111, it's the first full paragraph. First I thought it said chanted weekly at Tuesday martinis, and I thought that can't be right. But anyway, it says matins. What's that?
Matins.
Matins.
It's morning prayer,
Oh, okay.
from the French word from matin.
Oh.
So you thought it said martini.
I just glanced at it. I thought, oh, what's this?
Well, we know where your mind is going. But,
Well, I think that's rather nice. You know?
I do too. I'm not arguing.
With a twist or with an olive is the question.
Yeah.
Cocktail, onion, or yes,
Sound or verbs.
yes, shaken, not stirred. Okay, so the background of Psalm 57 there on the bottom of page 26. I say there that this psalm is attributed to David, and it is attributed to him after that he wrote it after his experience with Saul in the cave. Saul went into the cave, as they say there, to relieve himself. David was hiding in that cave, and while Saul was busy with other things, David cut off part of his cloak. And then later on, he approached Saul to show him that he had it, and he said, I could have killed you, but I didn't. So why do you keep picking on me? Why do you keep trying to kill me? So it was. So the psalm basically puts David's feelings into words about how it felt to be, chased, but also then to be delivered by God from, all of the terrible things that were happening, and was another one of those experiences of God's mercy as far as David was concerned. So, and then, the commentary there, which basically recount the first 5 verses are supplication, and then the last 5 verses are thanksgiving. Have mercy. He says there, be merciful to me, O God, be merciful. Other translations say, have mercy upon me, O God, have mercy, for I have taken refuge in you. Now, interestingly enough, maybe just for me, but anyway, mercy does not always mean, like don't hurt me, don't hit me, treat me right. a lot of times it also means showing love, kindness, compassion, forgiveness, such as when it's used in the liturgy. I mean, where it occurs in Rite 1 for us, and since it's an option also in Rite 2, it comes at the beginning, and it's generally associated with something penitential, because the Kyrie, the Lord have mercy, is generally understood that way. But a little broader understanding of it is that in the East, particularly in the Byzantine usage, in the liturgy, they're singing "Lord have mercy" all the time, and "Lord have mercy" is often the response to their petitions. It's like in our prayer book, in the prayers of the people, you have Form 1 and Form 5 that are based on the Orthodox Byzantine liturgical litany, and each one of those responses is "Lord have mercy." But it's not always is being said in a penitential thing, because it's asking God to bestow everything that God has. It's sort of equivalent to the Hebrew word shalom. Because shalom is generally translated as peace, but it's all good things that God can possibly bestow is what the word means. It has a single meaning, but it has all of these other connotations to it, and so does mercy. So when we use "Lord have mercy" in the liturgy, even though it might be in a penitential place, it's not just asking God to let us off the hook. It's also asking God to bestow upon us all kinds of good things that we need to live our life and be part of His people. So, there under number 2 on 27 there, B, the wings under which the man prays are mercy and faithfulness, expressing the intimate nature of God's involvement in human history. So, in the shadow of your wings will I take refuge until this time of trouble has gone by. The image of wings comes out oftentimes in the Old Testament. And here the wings, as it says, are God's mercy and faithfulness.
How is that determined? I mean, where does it say that?
Well, from the Hebrew, that's how they interpret this.
Okay, so like in the 91st Psalm, he dwells in, the wings are mentioned,
Yeah,
seems to me, in there, and is it the same meaning there, or?
I believe it
Oh.
is. So, and another aspect then of this psalm, and that I think is important to keep in mind here, is you see, God reveals Himself by manifesting a power inspired by love. So God's protection of David here, and these words in the mouths of any believer, are in response to having felt protected by God at some point and wanting that protection again. But it's something that God gives because of God's love for us, not because of anything else. It comes purely from the love of God. And that's why so often in this, mercy and love almost become equivalent. Because mercy flows from the love of God from God's very nature. And again, it's not just another word that is synonymous is compassion. We could say empathy, but compassion, I think, says it a little better, even though one's Greek and one's Latin, But okay, any other thing on this?
Well, just on that one, just that particular verse 3, he will send from heaven and save me. He will confound those who trample upon me. He will send forth his love and his faithfulness.
Mm-hmm.
Now, to me, that could also be really good at confounding the enemy. If it's God's love and faithfulness, what are they going to fight against? They're going to, that's a lot stronger and more powerful than anything they've got. Not to mention that it would do good for David or whoever's doing the prayer, but it would do something for everybody.
Mm-hmm. I just put down the Hebrew word there in D, kabod. It's the kabod of Yahweh, the glory of God that is revealed also in what God does to save his people, what he's doing to save David here, or what he did to save David from the clutches of Saul. But again, it's not just the manifestation of God, like in the Transfiguration last Sunday, or from the first reading from Exodus about Moses' encounter with God on the mountain. That certainly is displaying the glory of God, the splendor of God, the majesty and the power of God, and the overwhelming luminescence of God. But also God's glory gets manifested when these acts of love are experienced by people, and their response is thanks to God, because again, his deeds are a manifestation of his glory. Okay. Now, in the verses 6 to 11, it said in the book that I was following, said that these last verses were thanksgiving. It was a thanksgiving for having been delivered, protected. But particularly B here and C, those notes, in the Bible there is a kind of balance willed by God, according to which evil backfires sooner or later on its author on the basis of retribution that is innate to the works themselves. So here, even in verse 5, they've laid a net for my feet, and I am bowed low. They have dug a pit before me, but have fallen into it themselves. And then it's that idea that sort of underlies this, that God knows the hearts of people, and those who will evil and carry out evil oftentimes become the victims of the very thing that they were trying to inflict on somebody else. And so it says there that, evil backfires sooner or later on its author. So whoever perpetrates evil, oftentimes, in the Bible anyway, becomes the victim of of that evil. It may take a long time, but it'll happen. Because there's that sense of God balancing the score here. And it's an Old Testament idea. Jesus doesn't talk about balancing the score. If the man hits you on the right cheek, turn and offer him the other. He didn't say hit him back.
Right. The old cheaters never prosper.
Cheaters never prosper,
Yeah.
right? Well, Okay. And see there, the man renouncing both his desire for vengeance and trying to achieve justice on his own, entrusts himself to God, who will foil the plots of his enemies and confound them. So in a sense here, the recognition of God's deliverance and protection, and the fact that just as a kind of a natural outcome of evil that's being acted out on somebody, that it eventually will come back on the people that are doing it. It's almost an act of surrender here to God, understanding that God is the one who does the protecting, that Yahweh is concerned about his own and those who are trying to be obedient and faithful to his covenant, and that God can be depended upon in the worst of circumstances to be faithful to his own, and that he will not allow them to ultimately to be destroyed. Now, fast forwarding to the 20th century, that's a sentiment that a lot of people who survived the Holocaust did not possess, because that was not, for some of them, that was not their experience. In fact, there were numbers of people who went exactly the opposite to that and were just as vengeful as they could be, or at least they desired revenge so much on the people who had done all these things. But a lot of them gave up on faith because they said, well, if this is true, how could God have allowed this to go this far? Or as I heard on one of many programs, this woman was being interviewed, and she said that the concentration camps were so horrible, even God didn't want to visit there. Which is the way she was coping with the fact that the absence of any sense of God, operating here or doing anything for his own chosen people. If this is what you do for your friends, it's no wonder you have so few. So I thought I'd make that connection. And that's one of the reasons why, we always have to we have to struggle with this, because, maybe it is our experience that whenever we're in trouble, whenever we've had a hard time or whatever, that we prayed in faith and we get through it, and we have that sense that God is with us. Not everybody has that experience. Or if it's happening for them, they may not be aware of it always, or they attribute it to their own astuteness, cleverness, whatever, of getting through the problem. And even if they've prayed, that God doesn't necessarily get the credit for that. So again, it's a whole context of living in faith and believing and trusting, and in a sense, again, surrendering the outcome. to God and His love, and not trying to always control it. Question? Complaints, comments, observations, objections?
I think
Okay.
that you do reach a point, like the people in the concentration camp, or people who've gone through horrible things with their children, that you do have to really struggle to find God in that. If I was in one of the concentration camps, I think I would feel similarly
Mm-hmm.
until you came along and hit me alongside the head, and then I'd be fine.
I'll tuck that information away.
It must be like the people in Chicago who are losing their children.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
You know, how is this happening?
Mm-hmm. Where's God in all this?
Mm-hmm.
And without trying to give a smug answer or a simple answer, it's that God is there, but a lot of people are just not listening, or they've allowed themselves to be cowed by fear.
But is that an answer? Because you're saying the people in the Holocaust didn't do something?
Well, they couldn't do very much for themselves. Some of them did.
Right, and
Paid.
some who tried were just shot on the spot, you
Right,
know.
right.
So,
This is, this gets us into that whole area of, why do bad things happen to good people? The whole book of Job.
mhm.
And 38 chapters worth of speculation of Job saying things, and his friends saying other things, and his wife telling him curse God and die, and all of that. And then the last 4 chapters, God says, okay, now it's my turn. Did I ask your opinion when I created the world? Did I need your advice about how to set the foundations and all of that? And the question never gets answered. But it's God responding, basically saying, you cannot handle the truth. You cannot fully understand why these things happen. You are not capable. And it sort of harkens back to the Garden of Eden, to the the thing about the knowledge of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, of how God said to Adam and Eve, don't eat the fruit of that tree, because on the day that you do that, you will die. And the understanding basically is that when they did that, they entered into a level that they were not capable of handling. They could not handle this knowledge, because they weren't made for it. They weren't equipped for it. And so they had gone above their pay grade. And that's kind of what God says to Job too. It's above your pay grade. It's above your ability to know. And even if I would explain it to you, you wouldn't understand it. And so that's, that can either be a colossal cop-out, or it's a statement of faith and human limitation. That we can't understand everything. And I think that's particularly frustrating to us because we are so scientifically oriented and that, we want to know how everything works, and we should be able to solve this. We should be able to figure this out. We should be able to understand this. But again, it's that admission that maybe we don't know everything, and maybe we can't know everything. And it's not just because we have a limited education in some area, it's because maybe we're not capable of it. So,
Well, that opens the door to how do we, and I agree that we're mortals trying to understand the immortal, the finite trying to understand the infinite. But that opens the door to things that we think we understand. How can we actually be certain? So we take it as faith based on somebody's interpretation of this 1,000 years ago or whenever.
and that's,
Fake news, fake.
yeah, well, the difference is that even though we can't know everything, we stand in a tradition where not every answer has been given, but all of these generations and faithful people have lived this and have believed this and have handed this on and have clung to it and have lived by it and been fortified through it and seen through all kinds of things. So, we have to appropriate certain things for ourselves, not just go by what somebody else has said, because at some point in our life we have to have an adult moment where we own our faith so that we can deal with our own questions and our own struggles. It's a lot of times, in my experience over the years, people who have never had any growth in their religious formation as adults, who are still a lot of times relying on what they learned in a catechism class once upon a time, certain things will always be true, but how you explain it, how you talk about it, is where there's going to be a difference. And as an adult, you're going to look at the world a lot differently, especially through the lens of your own experiences of life. And maybe that kid answer that satisfied you once upon a time isn't going to cut it at this point in time. And so you have to, grapple with the thing over again. And, maybe you won't like the conclusion you reach, or maybe you won't have that same kind of certainty that maybe we once had.
Isn't it also the concept that you kind of mentioned? As adults, it's important that we hold a certainty regardless of what somebody else is certain about?
Well, yeah. I mean, you have to, we all have to have the certitude that we own for ourselves.
Right.
Even though it may be a common certainty that we share,
Mm-hmm.
it's going to be, it's individually expressed and I think felt and appropriated.
I mean, it's kind of like the difference between when a kid is baptized and the godparents say
Mhm.
all the things on his behalf, and when a person is an adult, they take those on their own.
Mhm.
And the other people's, they can help and everything, but the godparents are no longer in lieu of. The person has to do it on his or her own.
Mhm.
And doesn't have to be rebaptized or anything, just has to, own up to whatever it is he needs to do and do it.
Well, and as Bishop Lee was talking to the those who are going to be received as well as those who are going to be confirmed, that, you know, the rite really is a reaffirmation
Mhm.
of baptism, where they now own the experience. They express their adult understanding at this point in their life's journey of the faith and what it means. Which also means that because it is faith, it's something that's dynamic and alive and is going to keep growing and going, or at least has the potential to do that.